Yorgos. Welcome everyone who's just joined in, including our esteemed keynote speaker, uh, uh, Her Excellency Maria Spinoza Fernandez. Ma'am, I'm a little anxious to talk to you, so just pardon my anxiety. I have never talked to somebody of your stature before, so I am Keshav, and I'm handing over the floor to Dr. Yorgos. The live event is now live on Facebook. We will be sharing the live stream link on chat with anyone, and it's 7 o'clock it's 7:30 in India, Brussels. So, if with your permission and with the permission of everyone, including our esteemed keynote speakers. And ma'am, just if I stumble while talking to you or saying something, just please forgive me. I'm usually not like this.
Please. I'm really so happy to be here with you and to see you on the screen. Very happy.
So we'll start in the event. Thank you very much to all those who came to join us here on this Zoom call, but also on Facebook, where this event is being broadcast live. Thank you. Great thanks to our speakers of all ages and of all backgrounds who came here together today on this important day, which is the observance of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations and the International Day of Peace, for this intergenerational dialogue for the UN and the world we want. We will start soon, but I would like to give the floor first to my co-host and founder of the DICE of India, the organization that together with FOGS is hosting this event, to say a few words also about how this event will pan out and some rules that we have to respect to have the most productive event possible. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So it's truly an honor to be called host to such an event. I think the event is hosting all of us as the situation and the status quo of the world is. And I was reflecting on this some time ago, and the one quotation I remember that hit me was Albert Einstein's, who said that the World War IV will be fought with stones and twigs. And then I started thinking that here we are fighting the World War III with masks and gloves. And instead of the world being at war, now the world is fighting together. And that for me is really the context juncture at where we are, 75 years of the United Nations, an important decade for the Sustainable Development Goals. There are, in order to ensure that this event goes smoothly, just a few pointers that we can only request our esteemed guests and all the speakers to observe. While the speaker time is being exercised by a particular speaker, we request you to keep your mic muted. In case we also have a lot of respect for everyone's diversity and their views. So we will be very hopeful that we are compassionate, we are also loving, and we are accepting while being critical in our thinking and in our scientific temperament to respect everybody's views and their nationalities and their journeys of their own lives. And we are very particular about cyberbullying, that we can't have any of those things happening. That's a red line where we will be painstakingly, sort of regretfully, will have to remove the person from the call, whoever is found in bullying anyone, whether on chat or through their speech. We are, as a forum and as partners, all colleagues, committed for this to be a safe space for children, and all child protection policy norms will be observed about when children are on our forum. And we hope that, and we know that this cannot be done by ourselves. All of it only can be done together. So I really request you, and in advance, thank you for really facilitating this safe, inclusive, loving, nurturing, open space for all generations, for all the people. with harmony as one of our key goals, I guess, moving forward. So thank you, Dr. Yorgos, and what a pleasure and an honor to be a part of just this Zoom call. Thank you.
Thank you, Keshav. It has been a pleasure to prepare this and other things with you and your team. So just a brief description of our event, because it has 5 main parts. The first one after this introduction will be a video on the history of the UN and the UN75+25 generation or alliance that we want to build. Then we will proceed with the 2 keynote speakers that we are honored to have with us. Afterwards, we will have the Youth Senior Dialogue. After that, an artistic perspective. And finally, we'll end with reports from the Global Voice Dialogues, a series of dialogues on various topics that the DICE and other partners have been doing. So let's move to the next section then, which is a video on the UN and UN75+25. It's a Fox production, ready for the Oscars or almost. And, and the producer is Keith Miller from the Fox team. Thank you. Enjoy it. It's only 5
In the
minutes.
middle of the devastation of the Second World War, 26 nations vowed to defend life, liberty, independence and religious freedom, and to preserve human rights and justice in their own lands as well as in other lands. This quote comes from the Declaration of United Nations that brought the Allied powers together to defeat the Axis countries. By the end of the war, that number of signatories had nearly doubled as more nations committed to defeating fascism and creating a better world after the conflict was over. The international organization born of this declaration would adopt its name, pledging to ward off future evils and create a better world for all. As we celebrate the United Nations 75th anniversary, it is worth looking back at the founding principles of the UN and how its mission has expanded over the years. In June 1945, the United Nations Charter was signed by 51 nations. In its opening lines, the Charter calls on its member states to prevent the outbreak of war, protect human rights, respect international law, and promote increased quality of life. Although shadows of the Cold War hindered many of the UN's initial peacekeeping efforts, it succeeded in spurring decolonization and development, welcoming 108 new member states by 1990. These nations brought rich cultural experiences and different ways of thinking to the organization, reinforcing its commitment to better the entire global community rather than serve the interests of individual superpowers. As the new millennium loomed, the UN prepared to go beyond its origins as a peacekeeper and source of humanitarian relief and become the instigator of a worldwide renaissance.
To accomplish this monumental task, the United Nations proposed the Millennium Development Goals. These benchmarks in reducing poverty, improving health, advancing gender equality, and reinforcing global partnerships created a framework to help guide the actions of its member states towards a better world. 15 years later, the MDGs evolved into the Sustainable Development Goals to better meet the interconnected challenges facing the people, the planet, and the economy. Climate change and habitat destruction resulted in new importance being placed on environmental concerns, with the original MDG of environmental sustainability branching into 6 distinct goals. Other goals became more ambitious, with the prior goal of eliminating poverty expanding to also ensure a living wage and full gainful employment for all. Additionally, accords such as the Paris Agreement on Climate Change and the Global Compact for Migration brought the global community closer together by reinforcing their commitment to successfully completing the SDGs. However, the UN faces many challenges to its mission in the modern era. A rise in isolationism and authoritarianism throughout the world has strained the global community, causing many to question the relevance of the UN in the face of those who denounce it. COVID-19 has further complicated the UN's effort, closing national borders, forcing intergovernmental bodies and secretariat staff to conduct their business virtually, and causing the deaths of almost 1 million people worldwide. As the UN embarks on its next quarter century, it will have to meet even greater challenges in order to succeed in its mission.
Overcoming these challenges, from climate change to a pandemic, food insecurity to increasing inequalities, will require consistent action from groups and individuals that is based on strong moral principles. FOGS has developed a moral foundation in the Hexalog, a 6-point guide for assessing the behavior of institutions and individuals. By applying the Hexalog in their daily lives, as well as working to find new ways to make progress toward the SDGs in their communities, global citizens can bring about the change they wish to see in the world. To this end, FOGS and the DICE are looking to aid in the successful realization of the global renaissance envisioned by the UN. To ensure that result, we are beginning the UN75+25 alliance, which seeks to unite the experience of those who have served as a part of the international governance community for the past 75 years with the innovative spirit of the generation that will lead the next 25 years of global development. By bringing the strengths of these two groups together, we hope to create ongoing partnerships that find new, effective solutions to global issues and further a grand narrative of hope for all. The United Nations was founded to oppose the evils of war, poverty, and tyranny, lighting a spark of hope in one of humanity's darkest hours. Thousands of people working as peacekeepers, humanitarian aid workers, and secretariat personnel have fought to turn that spark into a flame, with some even giving their lives in the service of the UN and the world. We are the inheritors of that flame, and it is up to each of us to fan it into a beacon that spreads its light to every corner of the globe.
Okay, that was it. Some artistic historical intervention to start with. But now we are going, let's remember the title of our event today, A Model UN for a Model World. Both of these need model people to work, to be made to work. And we have two role models for our keynote speakers today, Her Excellency Maria Fernanda Espinosa and Mr. Richard Kinley. I would like to ask first Maria Fernanda, if I may call her that way, and say a few words about her. When I talked to our younger colleagues today about you and the possibility of your participation, they all felt like, my God, we have been doing model UNs for a while and we play the General Assembly President, etc., but we've never come anywhere close to a real General Assembly President. And they feel really, really honored and lucky to have you with us, as we all do. Just to say that you have been, in addition of President of the 73rd session of the General Assembly, also Foreign and Defense Minister of your country, Ecuador, as well as an academic, before that a poet, an activist for indigenous people's rights, women's rights, advocate. So I think you are a real Renaissance woman, if there is that term, right? Because you combine all these elements together with humanity, which is the most important one. And I'm very privileged myself of having worked with you over the last months in the context of FOGS. So with all this rich background, we will all be watching very closely what you want to say about the UN, the past, and more the future. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, dear Georgios. Thank you for inviting me to share this extraordinary moment with young leaders, opinion makers. And this is a very special day. Today is International Peace Day. And we are commemorating not only the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, but you know, it is very telling that we are gathering here around International Peace Day. And I truly believe that young people are key actors to sustaining peace. And we all know, and you know very well, that peace should not be a utopia, but rather an inspiring force to act and transform for all of us. And I can already feel, even if it's virtually, I can feel this great energy coming out of this event. And I'm very happy to be with you today. And, you know, everybody now connected, watching online, I really want to commend you, you know, all the young people's force, and thank you for what you do every day in your communities, in university, in raising your voice to support the work of the United Nations and the crying need for greater international solidarity and cooperation. And I think that amid this unprecedented global crisis unleashed by the COVID-19 pandemic, young people continue to play a critical role in disseminating accurate information, in tackling myths and stigma. We heard our first speaker today supporting information sharing programs and helping, you know, to build preparedness and resilience at the national level. So young people have demonstrated to be an example of resilience during this pandemic, but also, you know, I think it's very important. My message today is never underestimate your collective power as young thinkers, as doers, as activists, as change makers. And some of you might be thinking, well, yes, it's easy for her to say, but I wasn't born a politician or a diplomat. I was like you, someone working at the community level with persons with disabilities, with indigenous peoples, with refugees and migrants in my country. I have been a student like you. So I think that by working in your communities, in your environments, you have already taken the first step that I took on my path to the UN. And you don't need to work for the UN to make the difference. You already have the power. You have power as activists. You can use your voice like young people across the world have done on climate change or COVID. You have the power as citizens. You know, politicians are more likely to support, for example, the Sustainable Development Goals or deliver on the Paris Agreement if they think their constituents care about these issues. And you are the constituents, you are the voters at the end of the day. And you have the power as consumers. When it comes to issues like plastic pollution, your personal choices can shift the behavior even of big companies, you know, and you have the power as change makers. You know, young people can also help mitigate the impact and consequences of the current crisis in the longer term, including by engaging around issues such as promoting social cohesion and countering hate speech, xenophobia, human rights violations, violence in all its forms, and by building strong and inclusive initiatives and projects. Your work through social media, you have the power to transform the world together with others. I'm a strong believer in shared leadership. And let's go here to the role of the UN and the future of the UN we want and deserve. You know, we saw this beautiful movie that is going to, of course, win the Oscar. And when the UN was established, we saw in all these years, 75 years, dramatic reductions in poverty, the elimination of smallpox. We have seen women gain suffrage in virtually all countries. We have the right to vote now. And the gender gap closed in primary and secondary education, at least at the global level. And the UN has been a key part of the story of the humanity's history through its peacekeeping missions, through its humanitarian agencies that feed, shelter, and protect millions of people every day, and through its role as a convener, as a platform for states to adopt, for example, the Paris Agreement on climate change, the Sustainable Development Goals, which have the potential to transform our world and save humanity. And I say save humanity because we are at the crossroads right now. So we must never forget these achievements when we hear the UN criticized for being a talk shop. You know, and apart from anything else, talking is very important. You know, we need to talk more, but perhaps we need to listen more. as politicians, as decision makers, to listen is perhaps the most important task ahead. Listen to your voices, your needs, your views, your creative ideas. And I mean it. And I would like to quote, I'm not going to quote too much, but, Fatou Sow, and her very inspiring essay that was shared by Georgios with me, and she says, we are able to think past if we are able to think our personal gains, we can create a United Nations we want for the world we deserve. That's what she says, and it has a strong meaning. She cannot be more right. A model UN involves diverse leaders who can come together and produce solutions for humanity. So if we are able to think past our own personal gains, we can create a UN we want and the world we deserve. But as you all know, that is only part of the story. The gains, the successes of the UN, the opportunity with UN75 to have our voices heard. I was saying this is only a part of the story, unfortunately, because of COVID, we have seen, so many gains, a setback in so many gains, for example, the reduction of poverty, the gender gap worldwide. So I would say that across the world, too many people have been left behind. So we need to continue to work hard. 600 million young people, a third of the total youth population, live in fragile and conflict-affected states. This is huge, and now restrictions of movement because of the COVID-19 pandemic is hampering the ability of young leaders and organizations to mobilize and support their communities in situations of conflict and suffering. So, but we also know that young people have not been invincible to COVID-19 effects because 90% of the world's students, which means 1.5 billion young people, are being kept away from school and universities due to physical distancing measures. So before the pandemic began even, it was estimated, and these numbers are staggering, 1 billion young people would enter the labor market in the next decade, out of whom less than half, 400 million, would find a job. So this coming recession is increasing the uncertainty about the prospects of the remaining 600 million that are not going to have access to jobs. But not everything is bad. The health sector has become the largest employer for young people. This trend is reflected in most countries despite of the socioeconomic context. So I see that young people, you here, continue to mobilize despite of the world's lockdown. So I think that we have to continue working together, relying on your wisdom, on your voice, working together. I'm very fond of intergenerational dialogue. So I think that what we are living and experiencing today is, of course, pain and loss and crisis. But at the same time, I think that we have seen incredible creativity, multiple voices mobilizing around the future of the UN. And the UN has a central role. Without the voice and agency of young people, I think the UN has a lot to lose if we don't take up your contribution. So we need you, or better, I would say you are the UN in a way. The United Nations is not a self-operating machine. It's not an autonomous weapon. It requires our agency, our commitment. So, and here again, let me use the words of this brilliant Pakistani blogger. Again, thank you, Giorgio, for this. It's Usua Azainab, and saying that we need the UN to employ its resources for development and a well-versed, productive, and aware youth. We need the UN to provide educational opportunities to deprived communities, as development and empowerment isn't possible amidst hunger, malnutrition, and illiteracy. So the problems that the world is facing, climate change, the nuclear threat, the challenges in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. These problems do not respect borders. They cannot be contained by walls. Today, a drought in Asia could lead to soaring food prices in Africa, or a market crash in Europe could precipitate a global economic downturn. And the COVID pandemic has hit every country, every community, and we know that no one will be safe until everybody is safe. So we are profoundly interconnected, and we need an international governance system to manage, to decide, to protect our common heritage, our commons. But in here, I'm not only speaking about the atmosphere or our oceans or biodiversity, which are our shared heritage. I'm thinking about security, collective security, and I'm thinking about health as well. So it's obvious that our world is getting smaller every day. Clearly, we need more cooperation and not less. But a time when the case for multilateralism should be obvious, it's the obvious answer. We are witnessing a rise in nationalist sentiment, go-it-alone responses. So across the world, many governments are turning inwards. They are too preoccupied perhaps with domestic problems to invest in global solutions we need. Some are actively trying to undermine our rules-based international order or to exploit the legitimate grievances of those disadvantaged by unchecked globalization, those left behind the globalization benefits. So people, meanwhile, are losing faith in the ability of institutions to keep them safe and improve their lives. So what can we do together? That is the question for today. We can use our collective power, whatever our differences, all of us want the same things. What do you want? What do I want? It's pretty much the same, a safe place to live, enough food to eat, a good education, a clean environment, access to healthcare, the freedom and the opportunities to be who we want to be. And this is why we're here for. And the good news is that we have, for example, the Sustainable Development Goals, which I strongly believe it's a blueprint for achieving that vision, if only, and this if only, we can all work together. And that is where you come in, as young leaders and opinion makers. You are the largest generation of young people in history. Between now and 2030, the deadline we have set ourselves for achieving the SDGs, half of the world's population will be under 30. So, many politicians, and I have heard them, they see this explosion, demographic explosion of young people as a problem. And yes, of course, it's not without challenge. We saw the issue of employment and access to jobs, the future of work, but this is also a great opportunity. Believe me, it is a great opportunity. Younger generations are highly educated and creative. You are willing to take risks and to challenge, receive wisdom. You were born as global citizens of an increasingly interconnected world. You understand better than some policymakers and some politicians that the problems we face cannot be solved by one government or indeed by governments alone. You are instinctively multilateralists. You cannot afford to exclude you. We cannot afford to exclude you from decision making. We cannot afford not to have you as partners on the ground. And in my work as president, as minister, I tried hard to ensure that young people were involved, but not in a tokenistic way, but were part of the decision making table. And that's why, the motto for my presidency was to make the UN more relevant to people. And you have, still a critical role in making the UN more relevant, more responsible. And we need, your solutions for the challenges we face. We need you to spread the word about the SDGs, about the need to have a COVID recovery plans that ensure a greener economies, decent jobs, and quality education for young people. And we need you to challenge us, to give us your ideas and how to make the UN more effective, more inclusive, more transparent and accountable. So now that we are witnessing the 75th anniversary of the UN, I think youth voices, have been already decisive for this year's global dialogue on the UN we want and we deserve. I am very aware that if we are asking you to do all these things, we also need to do more to empower you. That is why my constant refrain, change the narrative on youth from one of problems to one of opportunities. Integrate national youth policies into broader development plans and civic, political, economic activities, and boost funding for youth programs. In nearly all countries, the youth sector is underfunded, especially now with the crisis. So we need to invest in the capacities, agencies, and leadership of young people, even as we call on you to work with us to address global challenges. So I often quote former UN Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld, who said, the UN was not created to take us to heaven, but to save us from hell. So these words are meant to serve as a bit of a reality check, but whenever I hear them, I think we can do better. We can do better, and we can do better together. And now I have to tell you that you have now the opportunity. We were told that we need to build back better. We cannot go back to normal because normal was the problem in the first place. So in spite of this crisis, in spite of the suffering, of the losses of life, we have the opportunity of building back better together. Inclusive multilateralism, multiple voices to feed into a much needed reform process of the United Nations is much needed today. And it would be great for you to look at the outcomes of the global survey on UN75. 1 million people, most of them young people, responding to what they think about the UN and the future of the UN. And the message was very clear. 6 out of 10 said that they think the UN has made the world a better place. But more than 80% said that the UN needs a profound retooling. And for this profound retooling, for this building back better, we need you. And we need your voices, your talent, your intelligence. And let me just close yet by another quote from a young thinker, Pedro Campos, a Brazilian thinker. And he said, the main goal of the UN should be to create the basis and foundations for effective global governance, because by doing this, it will be possible to handle the crises and situations like poverty, wars, epidemics, pandemics, starvation, global warming, ensure respect for human rights, etc. in an amplified scenario, what will make feasible more assertive interventions and results. So we continue to build together, to co-build. Thank you, Pedro Campos, for your wisdom as well. And we are counting on you. It's a privilege to be here with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Fernanda. This was, I feel like going out now and starting to build with you, because we're fully energized by your speech, by what you shared with us. And first of all, you give a run to the younger generation for their energy. We have to see if they can match it, because all generations, we have a lot to still give, and this alliance together will make it happen. And also thank you for choosing to be with us today, which is a day of so many events, but your choice obviously to give priority to interaction with the youth and the younger generations shows that you really mean what you have told us. And we look forward also to the discussion afterwards with the youth in which you will participate. Thank you very much. I'm turning now to our second keynote speaker, Richard Kindley. Richard, I have worked closely together, and I've seen him in very difficult times at the Paris Agreement when we're supporting there Christiana Figueres and Richard Kindley. They were the duo of the Secretariat of the UNFCCC who were pushing, fighting for it. And it was done, and it was the result of very hard work, a lot of inspiration, and really belief in all this that the UN stands for, and common action for global challenges. Because Richard is really another kind of role model. Maria Fernanda was a politician before, chose that route, which is not an easy one, and tried to influence from there. Richard has been with the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change since its beginning in the 90s, and helped set up this convention, its secretariat, and the path to its successes, and making climate change a central, widely perceived as a global issue that has to be dealt with. So Richard, before that, he was with the Canadian government working international environmental policy issues, but since the 90s, until he retired in 2017, he has been with the UNFCCC Secretariat, and in his very successful career as Deputy Executive Secretary and Assistant Secretary General of the UN. So for me, he really personifies what an international civil servant is, which means a person of integrity, a person of deep knowledge and of deep understanding of how things work, which he puts all that to the service of the common good. And he means it, and he's a very competent. He could have found a better job, perhaps better paying in the private sector, but no, he was there and insisting sleepless nights. So Richard, thank you for being with us today, and we're ready to hear you.
Thank you, Yorgos, very much. I have to say it has been some of the highlights of my career were the collaborations that you and I did together. But today I'm really happy to be with this group. I always find it inspirational to be together with young people, especially committed, engaged people like yourselves who are willing to take up the torch and the challenges and go forward at a time when we really need to change things and bring about better institutions and a better world. So I'm really delighted to be here. It's also a bit humbling, I think, to follow Maria Fernanda Espinosa from her very expansive and inspirational remarks. I will come at it from a slightly different perspective, which is my 20+ years of experience in the climate world, climate negotiations. So I'm speaking more as someone who was an international civil servant, someone who has been in an intense love-hate relationship with the United Nations. And today we're talking about a model UN, the UN that we want for a model world. I couldn't help but start by asking the question of myself, is the UN a model institution? And unfortunately, I think I'm forced to answer that no, it is not, at least not yet. But for me, on this day, a more important question is, has the UN made the world a better place? And there, I think the answer is unequivocally yes. If one contrasts the last 75 years, 1945 to 2020, with the previous 75 years, we see a remarkable difference. The UN has not solved all of these problems by itself, but it has made really important contributions to dealing with colonization, preventing global conflict, preventing depression, dealing with pollution, subjugation of women, racism. All of these issues we are in a better place because of the UN over its 75 years. So as we embark now in the next couple of hours in a conversation about how the UN could be a better place, let's at least pause at the beginning to take a moment to celebrate what the UN has achieved in the last 75 years. Before getting more deeply into my remarks, I wanted to flag 2 points at the outset before we begin to take stock. The first is that over the last 2 decades, quite a number of new issues have come onto the agenda, the kind of issues that I think the UN founders in 1945 would never have contemplated would be dealt with in international institutions. Environmental issues, sustainability, technology issues, income inequality, just to name a few. And I think a question that it would be very good to hear your views on is the UN doing a good enough job in dealing with these issues, many of which are interrelated and up to now have tended to be dealt with sectorally. Could we do things better by having a more cohesive approach in this basket of what one might call non-traditional security issues? And secondly, Maria Fernanda also mentioned this in her remarks. For the first time in the history of the United Nations, we're hearing important global players questioning the value of international cooperation and of multilateral institutions. They're promoting what you might call a me first nationalism, and all of us who care about the UN need to be deeply concerned about this, I think. But rather than despair, I would argue that we need to take this as an incentive to really focus our minds on how to make these multilateral institutions into the kind of organizations that we all need and want. For my contribution to the discussion, I really hope that it will lead you to some discussion in the 2 hours that follow on how we can move the UN as an organization along the spectrum from its current, shall we say, imperfect status towards that which maybe not perfect, not perfection, but at least is something better. And I'd like to throw out for you to reflect on, comment on, please, 5 themes. The first would be, in looking at the UN that you want, that we want, I would encourage us all to look beyond just the General Assembly and the Security Council. They are extremely important, but the UN system is much broader than its New York institutions. And oftentimes, I think you may find that there is greater scope for progress in some of the specialized and technical fields, which are often slightly less political than the main institutions in New York, whether in environment or in agriculture, refugees, for example. And we in FOGS have been raising the question whether these kinds of issues might require some new institutional approaches in parallel to the Security Council for more traditional security issues, where this suite of non-traditional issues could perhaps be dealt with in a more cohesive way. Second point I wanted to emphasize is, in striving for a new and better UN, I think we need to bear in mind that multilateralism or international cooperation are not ends in themselves. They're not a panacea. Rather, enhanced multilateral cooperation or stronger UN have essential roles to play, but for solving complex global issues, we're going to require a mixture of local action, national action, civil society action, much of which can be facilitated or supported by international cooperation, but international cooperation alone is not going to get us out of the mess that we're in now. And I give as an example of this, which is dear to my heart, from the climate change world, we have successfully, over the last 25 years, developed 3 global agreements, which are fairly decent agreements, I think. Perhaps I'm biased. But where we are really lacking is in the national implementation of these agreements. And that means we really need to focus on national and local action. This leads me to my third point, which is about public participation, engagement, and mobilization. And I think many of you are deeply committed in these areas. While this kind of engagement is important in international processes, I would offer here the perhaps heretical view that actually I think engagement in international processes is secondary to engagement at national level. And I say this because of the principle which is overarching in the United Nations institutions, in the UN system as a whole, which is that of national sovereignty. Governments, national governments in international bodies adopt decisions, they adopt treaties guided by their national positions. Governments need to be pushed, they need to be held accountable, and they also need to be empowered and emboldened to take the kind of ambitious action that we need. Again, in the climate change area, we see where the greatest effect can be had is in national capitals, I would argue, rather than in the negotiating halls. That is where the real difference in changing emissions and in strengthening adaptation will be made. My fourth point is a bit different. I really wanted to underline in strengthening the UN, but also in all advocacy and engagement work that you do, the importance of building coalitions. Coalitions that stretch across countries, but also across sectors, if we want to achieve our ends, it's clear to me, at least, that we have to work with others, often with others who have different interests than ourselves. And this means that there has to be compromise, which is essential to building coalitions, but we won't succeed without them. And my final point is that I believe we need a new narrative of hope, justice, and sustainability for the next 25 years. The UN in 1945 reflected a vision that the leaders of governments at that time, and I think the people of the world, wanted for their better world. They were getting out of the destruction of the Second World War, but they had a vision of the world that they wanted. Over the last 75 years, the UN has, well, it's been doing its job, working for a better world. But in the process of doing that, it has taken on the world's problems, if we might say. It has taken on the tensions and the conflicts and has become trapped in this narrative of challenges. I think it would be very, very important for the next 25 years if we were to have the Secretary General and all senior and other officials in the United Nations articulate a positive vision for the future, a narrative of hope, optimism, justice, and sustainability for the next 25 years, and one in particular that will resonate with people around the world and bring them back into the umbrella of the United Nations. We at FOGS have been trying to help others with this conception of a new narrative, and we hope that we can see some of you join this discussion, because I think it can be really important to inspiring people for the future. So in conclusion, I wanted to wrap up by saying to you all that working in the United Nations was a huge privilege for me. I hope to have made a difference, but also, as with all work in all of these areas where one is seeking to make great change, you have to be ready for a really tough struggle. The issues are complex, they're challenging, there are very strong vested interests who are against change. So I would encourage you to be idealistic, be positive, fight cynicism at all costs, but at the same time, wrap your idealism in a very thick skin to be able to stand up to the disappointments and the challenges that you're going to face. But never doubt that it's worth it to undertake these challenges. We have a great opportunity to make a better world, perhaps enhanced by the COVID challenges that we're going through now, but it is definitely worth it in every way to make this commitment and this journey towards a better UN and a better world. So I look forward to hearing your views, your reactions, and participating in the discussion as we go on for the next couple of hours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. And thank you for also making a pitch for the FOGS projects, which indeed have to do with a new narrative of hope and the new institutional arrangement for for soft security issues, and shows that your commitment is not about only during the period of being an international civil servant, but even afterwards. You're giving so much through FOGS and your other work for something that you believe deeply in. And I hope that's inspiring for our young colleagues, and we'll hear more from them and you'll have an opportunity to discuss directly. I hand over to my co-host Keshav to lead us to the next section.
Thank you so much. Just picking up from what our keynote speaker had previously talked about, resilience, action, and understanding the complexity. I think our two moderators for our discussion now really embody these in their spirit, in the way they have lived, and about being idealistic. So when I introduce them, it is my a deep privilege for me, both welcoming Maria and Yuriko. So I will begin with first Maria. Maria is a Greek activist, a climate activist, if I can proudly say, from Fridays for Future Greece. She's been working with Fridays for Future about 1.5 years in Greece, and she has also worked for the past 2 years with refugees, teaching them German and English. She just finished her high school while she has achieved all these incredible things. and now she's starting her university in Munich, Germany, in political science. And as somebody who works with Fridays for Future, I'm so happy to see Maria here and leading this discussion, representing the plus 25 generation. I think another person who is from that plus 25 generation is Yuriko, who truly embodies that same spirit. And Yuriko Yasukawa, with 35 years of work in sustainable development, human rights, peace, in and outside the UN system. She has served as the regional director for the UNFPA in the UN Population Fund for Asia and Pacific. She has been the resident coordinator in Bolivia, Costa Rica. She has been the associate director of UNICEF for policy advocacy and knowledge management. And there is a very long list of things that Yuriko has done. But the one thing with which I wanted to personally introduce Yuriko was her focus of love and the need for it in our actions, and the need for love in the core of everything that we do. So thank you, Yuriko and Maria, for being the amazing, I would say, colleagues, guides, and with your energy, I invite you to introduce our panelists and take over. Thank you.
So should I go ahead then to introduce the next activity? Can you hear me?
Yes, let's go ahead.
So thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Keshav, and thanks to Georgios and Keshav for inviting me to this activity. It's really a pleasure, and it's I always welcome an opportunity to hear, as Maria Fernanda was saying, from young people. In the UN, when I was working there, I mean, we would continually repeat this mantra of the importance of youth, but we didn't have as many opportunities as we should have to really listen to you. So I think this is great. So what we're doing now is to first hear from the young people about their own proposals and questions about the UN. And then after that, we will hear from the, I love that term, the plus 25 senior diplomats, their responses to these comments and questions. And then that'll be followed by a half-hour discussion involving everybody. So now I'm going to hand the floor over to Maria to moderate the inputs from the young people. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuriko, and also thank you, Kesha, for the really nice introduction. So let me also introduce the youth speakers who have responded to Fog's call for essays on the new narrative of the UN. So first, we will have Fatou Sow talking. She's 23 years old and a master's student at Johns Hopkins Saints in Washington, USA. Then we're going to be listening to Uzvay Zeynep, a 15-year-old blogger and orator, climate change and social media activist from Lahore, Pakistan. Following, we will have Pedro Campos. He's 20 years old. He's a bachelor student in the European Studies and International Relations in Lusofon, University of Humanity and Technologies in Lisbon, Portugal. Then we will have Joao Victor da Cruz de Paula Pinto. I hope I said your name right. He represents the social project de Olho na Quebrada of Heliópolis, the largest favela in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And then we will also hear from Devesh Gupta. He's the founder of Emerge India and works with people on self-transformation. And also, lastly but not least, Arturo Bilinga. He now works as a junior policy and advocacy officer at FOGS. And the last two Speakers are also our technical directors right now. So a great thanks about that as well beforehand. Yeah, so I'd say we'd start with Fatu's intervention. Fatu, if you're ready, we're all ready to listen to you. Please unmute yourself. Yes, perfect.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thanks so much, guys. Thank you, Maria and Yoriko, for those wonderful introductions. Thank you as well to Her Excellency Maria Fernanda Espinosa and Richard Kinley for the wise words that I'm definitely taking into account. Good morning to esteemed officials from the United Nations, international leaders, scholars, and students. I want to begin by thanking Katoikos, the DICE Global Voice Program, and the Foundation for Global Governance and Sustainability for giving me this platform and the opportunity to speak on issues that are prevalent in our global community, as well as other student scholars who submitted their essays. My name is Fatu Sow, and I am an African-American and Senegalese woman born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. As today is labeled the International Day of Peace, I believe it's important to ponder on what we as human beings strive to attain in order to create a more peaceful world. The mission of the United Nations is to maintain international peace and security. And although great strides have been accomplished in maintaining the peace, it is now time more than ever to redefine what we want for ourselves as a humanity. The beauty in humanity is the essence of community. When I think of the extremes I've experienced, from attending dilapidated public school buildings in a developed nation to now attending one of the top international schools in the world, only one word comes to mind, and that's Ubuntu. In the Zulu language, this means a quality that includes the essential human virtues, compassion, and humanity. How can we, as global-minded people, truly be at peace when a young man in Gambia decides to risk his life across the ocean, all to find work in a European country he couldn't find in his own? How can we sit here today on our laptops with access to technology peacefully when families in Yemen are literally on the brink of starvation, barely able to provide a single meal for their families? And how is it that it's been over 15 years since the Rwandan genocide took place and international actors willingly decided to step in when it was too late? A model UN, to me, incorporates community building so that another genocide, civil war, or famine never takes place again. A model UN involves diverse leaders, and I want to emphasize diverse, who can come together and produce solutions which benefit humanity. I cannot fully be at peace if I myself or my own colleague feels as though our God-given rights are tainted by a system that judges the humanness of a person based on the color of their skin. If we are able to think past our own personal gains and egregious means, we can create a UN we want for the world we deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatu. That was very nice to hear. So next we're going to hear Zeneb. She's talking about youth inclusion, something that we've already mentioned. Zeneb, if you're ready, go ahead, please.
Good morning, respected officials from the United Nations and my respected interlocutors. I'm thankful to the Fox Foundation, the DICE program, and all the institutions involved for providing me with this platform to voice my opinions as a citizen of the world and how it stands in contrast to the world I deserve to live in. I'm Usma Zainab from Pakistan, a 15-year-old social media and climate change activist. I believe that as we discuss international peace today, we must also realize that what peace means to the populations of developing countries. I observe their definition of peace to be a full stomach, sufficient clothing, and a roof over their heads. They're barely concerned if there are conflicts on the other side of the world threatening international peace. Their peace comes from employment, which unfortunately is rare. This unemployment then results in instability within the country. This instability leads to war, war being the nemesis of international peace. Hence, I could say that unemployment is a threat to peace. As we make this Zoom meeting through technology possible possible right now, we must also realize that this very technology has made innumerable employees in industries irrelevant and unemployed. Moreover, small-scale businesses which weren't able to adapt to this new technology have been wiped out of the economic competition. The sole reason for this was the lack of knowledge of technology. Another instance of unemployment is youth, which is unable to find jobs but is technology literate. Let me reiterate the scenario. Youth has technology but doesn't have jobs. Small-scale businesses have potential jobs but no technology to survive. I wish to see a UN that develops mechanisms which bring this technology literate youth in contact with small-scale businesses that require this technology to get working again. By reviving these businesses, can be boosted with more consumer goods available, lowering inflation and generating jobs. In this manner, the youth will find jobs to implement their technological skills, businesses will find mass media to make themselves known. Only when it is ensured that families are fed and clothed can there be an emphasis on the need to educate them and make them more productive and engaged citizens of the world. In order for the UN to achieve an ideal world for me, it must first consider the basic solutions for hunger in the context of today's technology. I believe if we look at the problem closely, the solution lies right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Zainab, for your words. Pedro, if you're ready, please go ahead.
Hey everyone, I want first to thank the organizers of this great event and the institutions behind it for the opportunity to take part in this discussion. I also want to thank the United Nations officials here for their visibility and the initiative to discuss with us, young people of the world, our desires and ideas for the future United Nations and its role in the world that we hope to build. I do appreciate your efforts to be as closer as possible to the people, especially the youth, because you are the future of this world. You are the next generation that will face a challenging world left by the past generations. I want to call your attention to the constant need of a true and deep cooperation that is necessary to overpass the major problems of our world, such as poverty, social inequality, starvation, global warming, disrespect for basic human rights, armed conflicts, gender inequality, etc. It is undeniable that the globalization process changed our world by connecting countries, economies, cultures, and people. And as a result of this, the power of the states was and is still being eroded. We must keep in mind that in a globalized world, national borders are not much more than lines in a map. A phenomenon that happens inside a country can have external origins and also produce consequences in other areas of the globe as part of a domino effect. In this sense, considering that globalization has the potential to boost any international issue into a global issue, we must have a place, a structure, and organization where we can truly discuss and provide a coordinated answer to the challenges that we will be called to solve. In a long-term perspective, we need to start to build the conditions to achieve global governance. The United Nations can be this structure, but for this to occur, it will be necessary to make adjustments and go through a long and complicated way. The current structure of the United Nations does not exactly put all of the countries in an equal position. It is true that every country has one vote in the General Assembly, what is assured by the Article 18, number 1 of the United Nations Charter, but in fact, the power resides in the 5 permanent members of the Security Council with veto power that all of the other countries have to accept and carry out the decisions following the Article 25 of the United Nations Charter. This discussion between the member states, this distinction, between the member states is not the best alternative if the goal is to boost cooperation and dialogue to face global problems and create a global governance. The challenge here is how to define an idea of an inclusive global order if every single country, especially the great powers like the US, China, and Russia, disagree in the main topics and have discordant ideas about how it should be. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Pedro. So next up would be Joao. I'm so sorry. You go ahead if you're ready.
Okay, and first I would say my English is not so good, um, so let's try something. I would like start to thank Fox and Dice for the opportunity and the space of expose the problems the young people from Brazil, from poor communities faces in Brazil. These problems has increased with the pandemic of COVID, as we have been abandoned by government during this difficult time. So I am João. I'm from Heliópolis, the largest favela in São Paulo with 200,000 habitants. Actually, I'm researcher from Observatório de Olho na Quebrada, and I believe we need give the voice from the communities. In Brazil, we have to need give the voices of favelas, because here we don't have voices, we don't know about data and other things. So my project, De Olho na Quebrada, my observatory, comes to being the voices of the people in this world. Can I be asked to help? Renata, please translate to me. I can speak in English.
Yes. Hi. I will help João with the translating from Portuguese into English. He's also a little bit nervous, and it's very important for him to be here. And since we are from a poor community in Brazil, we also have difficulty reaching out to languages classes and so on, and public studies are very poor here too. So João, you can say, pode falar em português.
Eu queria falar que aqui no Brasil, especialmente aqui em Heliópolis, a gente é desassistido pelo governo, e isso é muito ruim, principalmente no tempo de Covid. A gente tem que buscar nossas próprias vozes. Então, eu queria falar, para traduzir.
So João is saying that especially in Heliópolis, they face a hard time they feel abandoned by the government. They are left out in most initiatives. And especially during the pandemic of COVID-19, they have felt that their problems have not reached the government, and so they have to face it on their own, and their actions has to be on their own. They don't have the support of the government to create initiatives of emergency for health and for living. So they feel abandoned by the government.
Então, acho que eu como parte do observatório, vejo que o mundo que eu quero é um mundo onde que as pessoas possam ter autonomia dos seus locais, um mundo onde a gente possa cuidar de nós mesmos, mas que a gente também não precise ser abandonado para isso, sabe? Eu quero um mundo onde a gente tem esse suporte do governo, e acho que essa é a ONU que eu quero também. Eu quero uma ONU que possa estar junto com a gente, desde da gente aqui na Quebrada de Heliópolis, para falar sobre nossos problemas locais, até levar um moleque como eu, de Heliópolis, para falar para o mundo inteiro o que o mundo precisa ser.
João said that he thinks that it's important to have autonomy, that the young people have autonomy to speak out their problems and their needs, especially in the poor areas. And the UN that they want is a UN that that works with their problems from inside out, that actually understand their needs as a community, and that they can reach out to the world like he does right now, being in this meeting that is so important to have his voice expressed to the whole world. So that's the UN that he wants.
Nice. Thank you for everyone to listen. Thank you, Renata, so much to translate it to me. My English is not good and I'm nervous, so is that.
Thank you, Zhao. Don't worry, we all understood what you wanted to tell us perfectly. And thank you for being here, although it is difficult for you. It is very inspiring that you try to bring over your opinion and let your voice be heard, although it is so difficult for you since you have the barrier of language. Thank you for being here. Okay, so next up, we would have Devish. Devish, if you would like to take the floor.
Thank you, Maria. Good evening from India to all the dignitaries. I think it has been 75 years since United Nations has been formed, which has been working towards saving the succeeding generations from the scourge of war and other purposes which have been enshrined in the preamble in Article 1 of the UN Charter. It is International Peace Today, and I was watching a video today of a peace rally where people were shouting peace and peace very loudly. It made me really think about whether peace is a matter of outside or an inside peace. So the question today is that, do we still have conflicts with or without bloodshed? And do we have armies who are still, which we use still for guarding us because of fear and a sense of security? Do we have countries creating and supplying weapons at one end? And do we still have those same countries advocating for peace at another end? Has United Nations ceased? Okay, United Nations has eased the suffering in these 75 years, but it hasn't ceased the suffering. So it has delayed it. It has given us time to go through the hardships, but it hasn't completely stopped the suffering. The present comes from the past, and this present modifies itself into the future. So it is very safe to say that the future is now. If you don't change today completely, then it is 75 or 7,500 years. It won't happen tomorrow. Now, what is this United Nations? And are we really united? Because united means one, a union, not separate states working for their self-interests, which come out from where they are, where their people are in their needs, wants, levels of development, understanding, and education. Now, these minds, or egos, if I can call them, or nations, come together to serve their own self-interests. So they can never go beyond their own interests and to what they identify as their own, as per their convenience. So Rohingyas are still dying at one end, while interventions would still happen to kill one Osama bin Laden. So question is that, is there an integration between the nations to form one system, integration? Or is there a mere cooperation between nations out of a sense of fear and want, and not out of what the world together requires or out of love? International law today has also just become another social tool for competition, because there is no final authority for universal application. Animals have been eating each other without a doubt, while civilized men have been consuming one another by due process of law. Nations themselves are being run by individuals who are so lost in their own desires and ego and insecurity, which has been created because of the attachment to the past cultures, history, habits, separative ambitions and desires. And who has created this poverty and disorder in the world? You, your parents, and your government, and our whole society has created this because we see that there is no love in our hearts. The love which is not there for the children, for any neighbor, for living or the dead. We have no love at all. Politicians are not eradicating any misery or ugliness in the world any more than religions or reformers are, because all of them are only concerned with little patchwork here and there, which comes out from their own needs, motivations, and with what they identify as their own. But if there will be love for all, these all ugly spaces would disappear tomorrow. Now the question is that what is this love? And do we love, and do we actually love anyone or anything with our whole being, even our parents, or a tree, or a dog? But I'm afraid because people don't. That is why there are such vast spaces in the beings of individuals, where there is ugliness, hate, and envy. A person who truly loves has no space for any ugliness or hatred or envy. Now, when you don't have love for your neighbor and order in your own life, how do you think that that mind can create a system of order and harmony in the outside world? So there has to be a love and deep, complete understanding of how the world works, how nature is. And when we can go beyond the self-interest and really understand what the other thing is, what are the requirements, where we can leave our models of cultural attachments, past history, and look beyond North Korea as not look at North Korea as a North Korea or Iran as Iran. That's when we can get out of the identification and separation and conceptual realities of religion, nationality. And maybe then we will be able to look at another human being as a human being, a life form as a life form, not as a black or a nationality, not as a terrorist or army personnel, because both of them are killing and protecting both, which they identify as theirs. Both of them are killing. We need to break away from this system, to completely understand the system in totality. And from there will rise a new system from today, for today and from today. It is only people who have love are free and happy. It is only people who are loving who have the energy to create a new world. No politician, no reformer, or any ideological saint or label, or any identification, or within the system, anyone coming from the system can do it. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Devesh, for these words. I think the words were loving themselves, not only about love. Okay, so next up we have Arturo. Arturo, please go ahead.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you all for these very inspiring words. Such intercultural and intergenerational, even multilinguistic exchanges always warm my heart, really. As you probably know, the topic of the call for essays we launched some weeks ago was the UN we want for the world we deserve. But sometimes, as many here, I'm sure, I cannot help myself wondering, do we actually deserve this world we are all talking about? Are we doing the everyday good actions to deserve it? And is it really a matter of deserving, or just by our human nature, or rather a matter of achieving, reaching, or building? I know that there is still a long way to go, but let us try to hardly work for this world we deserve. Let us try to stay united and show compassion and empathy, accept differences, and build the bridges of humanity that bind races, if they even exist, that bind cultures and civilizations together. I believe that these interconnected bridges are stronger than any ideology or any political party or anything. Throughout history, imperialism, fascism, and many more movements dictated by hate and ignorance have tried to burn these bridges to ashes, but they have failed to do so. And if a part of our humanity and our nature leaves these battles wounded forever, a part of it leaves them stronger than ever. And these parts are the better angels of our nature. And I believe that the UN was created by the better angels of our nature after atrocity reached its paroxysm. Never again, they said. I also believe that the United Nations, as many international organizations, needs to redefine, repurpose itself. Try to talk about the UN to someone who is not interested or connected to the international public affairs. The UN has become a very vague, disparate entity with many different agencies, with very easily confusing acronyms, and with an unfair and anachronic body that takes or often doesn't take some of the most important decisions on the international scene. This is how most people around me see the UN. Are they wrong? Not entirely, I would say. But one thing is very clear to me: the UN needs to change along with our rapidly changing world, or it will collapse, just like its older brother, the late League of Nations. Of course, the contexts are extremely different. We are not standing between two devastating world wars, but our current challenges are different, but not less important or threatening. And I will not cite these current challenges, because I'm kind of sick of and tired of enumerating these global problems and see very few progress, even though we have the tools, the knowledge, and the awareness to overcome them. Thank you very much. Over to you, Maria.
Thank you, Arturo. So we've now heard all of my peers, and I think that everyone has said something from a different perspective, everything as important as the other, and I hope all of this is going to be taken into consideration by senior people and people already in the position of implementing things in the future. I would like to thank FOGS and the days for giving my peers opportunity to voice themselves. And now I would like to hand over the moderation to Yoriko, who is going to moderate the responses of the senior people. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. So now it's the turn of the 25 plus colleagues to respond to the comments and questions brought up by the young people. There were a lot of different topics, so it might be difficult to cover all of them, but I think they are all important. I mean, questions like, how do you incorporate community building towards building peace in the work of the UN? How do you take into account these economic and social deprivations that are obstacles to peace, especially in developing countries? How do you give voice to people, especially young people living in marginalized and poor communities? How do you nurture love in the work of the UN? I would invite the senior people to take up the challenge of responding to these questions and to try to keep your responses within 2 minutes. And I thank the young people for being so disciplined on that. So I think we will start then with, oh, I'm sorry, I haven't introduced the speakers. That was the first thing I was meant to do. We first have Ms. Barbara Adams, who is the chairperson of the board of the Global Policy Forum, which is an independent policy watchdog of the work of the UN. She is also adjunct professor at the New School. We also have Ambassador Ado Lomus, who is the permanent representative of Estonia to UN Environment in Nairobi. We have Dr. Pascal Delille, counselor at the permanent delegation of the European Union to the UN in Geneva. And then we are lucky to have again Ambassador Maria Fernanda Espinosa, who was the president of the 73rd session of the UN General Assembly. She was also former foreign minister of Ecuador. And we will also have Mr. Richard Kinley, president of FOGS and the former deputy executive secretary of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So we are going to start with Ms. Barbara Adams. Barbara, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I have to say right off the bat, when I was asked to be involved, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I'm really pleased I'm here. The challenge of 2 minutes is immense. So I'm going to mention a couple of things that have struck me listening to today, and in particular, the last segment and the questions. The first thing that strikes me enormously from what you've been saying is we obviously need to rethink and redefine peace. And we need to rethink and redefine what we understand by security. When the UN was created 75 years ago, I'm not quite that old, but I have worked for it for 2 decades, so my views will be informed by a whole variety of experiences. It was very much focused, obviously, on cross-border challenges to peace, very much in the military context. What we've heard already very clearly is the threats to security and the threats to peace today are way beyond that. We're talking about whether it's in terms of a pandemic, whether we're talking about, very eloquently pointed out, the whole business of actually having employment and decent work, whether we're talking about food insecurity and issues to do with land grabs, whether we're talking obviously about issues to do with climate change and biodiversity. The solution to these problems today is not within one country. And it is not a matter of people negotiating at the borders. And so my first challenge I want to throw out for all of us is we really need to question how we're being represented. A lot of questions about whether the diversity and the various different interests that we all bring here are actually done justice to by the executive branch of governments from different countries negotiating with each other. And of course, that is not their function, is to represent the diversity. I'm not making an appeal for a parliamentary assembly. I don't know whether one would come back to that, and we want to talk about that further. I actually am not in favor of that direction either. But I think we've got this complete blank between what Joao was talking about, for example, and the way issues actually end up coming up on the negotiating table. The other thing that I want to really emphasize that we need to look at is the cross-border dimensions of all of our challenges, not only in terms of military, but that the UN, while the UN, ironically enough, is the right and relevant place from the point of view of having such a full range of mandates and issues. And maybe it's obvious from COVID what we're talking about as systemic problems. And it's been obvious before, COVID has just meant we can't ignore it. Nevertheless, the UN, the way that it was structured, its institutions, its rules, its operating practices, keep it in silos. And so I think another part that we really need to look at is to capture and be aware of what it can do and be very sensitive to the way in which its practices do not enable it to live up to its job. The UN in the multilateral world is actually unique. It's a multilateral body, and it's the only one, compared with the IMF, the World Bank, the WTO, NATO, etc. It's the only one that was actually created to make people's lives better. And yet, because of many of the dynamics that you've been talking about, it's actually been reduced to a deal-making body. It's been reduced to a place where it's the balance of power dynamics, it's the enemy of my enemy is my friend types of alliances, which I think Dervish would also pointed out is really not going to get us to some of the issues that we really need to talk about. So I think that we've also got to redefine what we understand to be solutions, not just problems. Joao made me think of a word I'm very much allergic to. It's the word inclusion. We hear so much about needing to be inclusive. Inclusive to what? Adding more voices to the current situation. Where's the hierarchy? How do we decide how to approach that? Pedros talked about the Security Council and the P5 and the balance, the weighted balance in voting. We have weighted voting way beyond the Security Council. And it's entrenched through the UN system, mainly by its funding strategies. We have 3 countries in the world today that fund close to 50% of everything the UN system does. So I think we need a whole new funding compact. We need to have a kind of a rule, if you like, that says that no one country can contribute more than 15%, because we know with that funding comes weighted voting, comes undue influence. So we have a variety of areas, I think. Now, on the inclusion question, I think we should be paying far more attention, actually, to exclusion, to the dynamics of exclusion, to how exclusion works, to looking at the obstacles to participation, not just trying to get everybody into the current existing practices. And I think we also have to recognize with all of that, part of the reason that I emphasize it is, yes, absolutely, there are differentiated voices, differentiated opportunities to participate. One of the things that we talk about a lot around the United Nations is this thing called policy space. And because so much of what is being decided today is cross-border, no country really has the full say about what it's going to do in its own country, has to get on somehow or other and make some kinds of international agreements. International agreements, by definition, are not international cooperation. And so I think that we really need to take a look at which governments in the world have more space to solve their own problems and intrude positively or negatively in the ability of other countries to solve theirs. And so I think we've got to and this of course is, to me, two things I'm combining. One is changing the narrative, but the other one is then connecting what the narrative is to the practices and to how we actually go about business. Personally, I'm speaking personally, I start with the narrative. A lot of people want to start with the structure. But I think people question the relevance of being involved in something, implementing something whose actual aspirations and framework they don't believe in. And so that's why, for me, although we keep on talking about this implementation gap, I don't think we can change the implementation gap unless we've actually got the narrative and what's on our agenda collectively right in the first place. I bet that was more than 2 minutes, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Barbara. So we have next Ambassador Lomas. Please go ahead. Are you there?
No, we cannot hear you, Ambassador.
Yeah, maybe you're muted.
No, even unmuted, there is a problem with the audio.
Maybe try changing your output or input, or how it is called for the speaking.
Well, should we, in the meantime, then go on to Dr. Dalil while the ambassador fixes the audio? Dr. Dalil?
Yes, can you hear me? Well, first of all, thank you to all the organizers. It's a real pleasure to be exchanging with all of you and with the youth, especially for me as a former university professor. It's always important to confront our experience and our thoughts to what our young people can tell us. Even though youth for me is not only an objective attribute about age and generation, it's an attitude. And I see people on this panel like Maria Fernanda or Richard, very young, in my opinion. I've heard a lot of hope, a lot of frustration as well, a lot of values, a lot of emotion in what our youth have been sharing with us. And coming from Europe, I think there's a lot I can understand because the European Union, like the UN, were born from the same horrors of war, of discrimination, and in a way we're twins. The EU is maybe a regional twin of the UN in the sense we were born trying to build on values and build on rules, on laws, a collective future, with a term that we don't use much anymore, the word progress. That I think is still very important. In a way, the EU has gone beyond because we have shared our sovereignty more than member states of the UN have accepted to share their sovereignty. That's also why I think when we speak about the UN and its limitations, we never need to forget that behind the UN, you've got the member states of the UN, and the UN is not a supranational government that could do things without the approval of its members. Of course, it's clearer with the Security Council, but it's also everywhere in the UN. So if we want a strong UN, I think we need, as citizens, as voters, to be engaged also nationally, locally. The UN cannot do wonders if the member states of the UN don't want the UN to do wonders. And the UN is so many things. It's the General Assembly, it's the Secretariat, it's many agencies, programs, funds. So we have to be very careful when we say the UN should do this, the UN does that. I'm sitting in Geneva right now, for instance. And in Geneva, I see a lot of very concrete things that some UN specialized agencies are doing for the common good. I see WMO working on science for climate. I see WIPO, intellectual property, working on so many aspects of intellectual property that we need also to fuel progress in our economies or adapt to new technologies. Just a concrete example, we are discussing at WIPO, when I say we, member states of the UN are discussing how artificial intelligence needs to be taken into account when we define the different property rights on copyright, patents, etc. It's very concrete, it's very useful. A lot of things are being done from UN agencies, funds. In Geneva, I see the ITU, International Telecom Union, where, for instance, the electromagnetic spectrum is being managed, where we decide satellites will use this kind of spectrum, 5G will use this kind of spectrum. All of that is UN. So for me, UN is not only Security Council, it's not only the most politicized elements, we also have to see all the good things that the UN can be doing at different levels, like Richard said earlier. And I don't want to be too long, and maybe we'll come back to that, but for the EU, working with the UN is natural partnership, because we see alike, we've got the same ideal. It's true that in these last few years, after the hopes of the end of the Cold War, we've been quite disappointed by seeing important member states of the UN ceasing to support it the way they used to support it. And sometimes we feel little, not alone, but with our family of member states supporting the ideal that we share, getting a little bit reduced. And it is, of course, a problem, but it gets back to the question I was mentioning earlier. There's no strong UN without member states of the UN supporting the UN. The UN is not a supranational government, and I see some of the youth who were kind of hoping the UN could substitute to failing governments. Unfortunately, that's not the way it can work. The UN can support, the different agencies and programs can support, accompany, fund a few things, but they won't substitute for national governments. And so that's maybe my warning about having a realistic expectation. We have to be realistic. And maybe I'll finish with a quote from Jean Monnet, who was one of the founders of the EU, about how much all our investment as people are important, at the same time how much institutions matter. There's nothing is possible without men. Nothing is lasting without institutions. So what the European Union has done, putting into institutions some collective project and trying to improve it over time, facing crises, it's kind of all evolving endeavor. The UN, for me, is the same. It's something that needs to evolve over time with the support of its member states. And that's why I think, and I encourage all our youth to work towards a stronger UN, but also starting with member states supporting the UN. I'll stop there for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think it's very important what you reminded us of, how the UN is not a super global government, but a collection of member states, and it's a product of how member states behave and what they decide, including what Ms. Adams was saying about this unfortunate practice of leveraging their funding to manipulate things in the direction that they wish. So I think that's something important to keep in mind in the discussions to come as well. Ambassador Lomos, have you been able to fix your audio?
Hello, do you hear me now?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
thank you very much, and sorry for this inconvenience. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And first of all, I'm very honored to be part of this today's discussion, and thanks for the folks for inviting. And it has been very informative and very interesting to follow the keynote speakers, but also the young people's and their expectations. I am representing Estonia at UN Environment Program here in Nairobi, and I have been involved the multilateral international environmental governance for several years. So I can highlight some of the, and maybe not directly give some very concrete answers, but to activate some more further thinking. But first of all, I'd like to also stress that the UN, we should take it as a global center for diplomacy. The diplomacy among the member states, but most importantly, every man counts and woman counts. It means that the diplomacy among the people, and we can't forget it, because all the great achievements within last 75 years have been accomplished because of the leaders, front runners, and the brightest ideas, which gained followers. And of course, we have to take into account that all member states in the UN, we have to respect their sovereignty rights, and we can't encroach at the national level. So therefore, we can call the UN as an influencer in a modern language, where the member states gathered can nudge each other into the right direction. And we can see that within 75 years, there have been great achievements. As I have been very much focused on the environment level, 50 years ago, 1972 was established the UN Environment Program, and was held the first environment global UN level conference, which have been now reached to this proliferation of different agreements, but also the awareness raising. And this I'd like to stress as an opportunity for our younger generation, that the accessible, transparent, and reliable information, this is the key. The access to and also the information for the decision makers at the UN level, national level, and regional level, but also besides top-down approach, they're very important in influencing our positive development, our sustainable development, which I can call it's a very unique and very important framework for all to follow. But to achieve the implementation is that also the bottom-up approach, that every voice counts, and the more the same singers we have, the same song singers we have, the more influential your voice is. So if the young people are also aware of the important problems and emerging issues, the current technologies are actually very valuable in communicating to the national level, and the vice versa from the UN level to the national level, because at the end of the day, the implementation is not happening at the UN level. UN is a collaboration center the multilateralism is very important, especially nowadays when we are facing the pandemic, where the collaboration and the set goals which are in favor for the environment, human health, and the security are very crucial. So therefore, we are saying that what I want to say, the information, the access to information, which will raise the awareness and will reach to all, every single person in this planet. And then the reaction should also trigger our policymakers at different levels, which should also trigger the actions for solutions. And I very much like what I have heard, that we need to improve our ability to listen. When we are listening, then we are also able to provide good solutions and collaborate with each other. So I'm very much thankful for this opportunity, and of course looking forward for the further discussion. Thank you.
Yoriko, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Ambassador Lomas. So we will go back to Ambassador Maria Fernanda Espinosa again for your response to the young people, please. Ambassador Espinosa, are you there? Okay, so should we go to Richard in the meantime while we look for Maria Fernanda? Richard?
Thanks, Yoriko. I really don't have too much to add. I think we've had a really interesting exchange amongst, well, not only generations, but different perspectives and different regions, which to me has resonated for the breadth of the challenges that we face, also their interconnectedness, and the level of commitment that I've heard from people in working together to try to find these, to find the solutions that we need. Also, I feel heartened by the strength of commitment to the United Nations, recognizing that this discussion we're having about the model UN we want means that we need to invest a good deal of effort in making that institution a more perfect institution. And I hope that certainly in FOGS we can take on board a number of the ideas that have been mentioned in the course of the conversation today, bring those into our work on the narrative and on new institutional questions and our advocacy within the UN about what it needs to do to have a more prominent place in the hearts and minds of the global public. So I would simply thank everyone for their wonderful contributions, for their energy and enthusiasm. And we have still, though, a lot to do. Let's go forward from this 75th anniversary. And to the extent that time permits, I hope we have time now for some more vigorous exchange about the maybe priorities where we need to focus. Might be something that would be quite interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Have we found Ambassador Espinosa? Is she back?
Yes. Sorry.
Okay.
So I'm here. I've been listening, and I had a little bit of a technical hurdle here, but it's solved with the internet connection. Okay.
Okay,
but
please.
I'm here. I listened, and I'm really, moved, inspired by the wealth of information, of thinking, listening to Fatu on exclusion and inequalities. This is part of the core when we are thinking about priorities. Inequalities are killing us literally now, and we are seeing this you know, playing out in the midst of the pandemic. So that should be, you know, at the core of our concern, to fight inequalities in all its forms and exclusion. We heard Ushuaï Zainab saying that peace is not only the absence of war and conflict, but it is our right to food, to shelter, to have decent jobs, and to close the digital gap that now it's so obvious, you know, for us that are meeting here, but so many people are absolutely alienated and excluded, even, you know, with no access to homeschooling because of the digital divide. To hear to João Victor saying, and of course, and here I'm going to switch into Spanish for a bit, pero João Victor diciendo, queremos tener la autonomía para decidir, queremos poder tomar las decisiones y poder ser escuchados, y nos sentimos abandonados por nuestro gobierno. Pero cuando te sientes abandonado por tu gobierno, hay un lugar, un gran paraguas para todos, que es el sistema internacional y multilateral, la gran arquitectura de derechos humanos que ha sido creada y generada en los espacios de las Naciones Unidas. Davesh, hablando de, sorry, I continue, you know, on and on in Spanish, sorry about that, but mentioning the first powerful phrase of the UN Charter, we the peoples. No, so we the peoples have to share the burden and the responsibility to make the system work better for all. And here, when I say shared responsibility, we do have, you know, a voice, a right to be part of the decision-making processes. And here, I am totally in tune with Barbara when she said, you know, we talk about inclusion, let's talk about exclusion. And what are the structural and political reasons of exclusion? And I think that should be also part of our conversation. I love this idea of the future starts today. We are building the future today, starting today. And Arturo, you know, saying, you know, we are tired of the UN rhetoric, and the language of the UN sometimes it is vague, it is confusing. We should be using less acronyms and perhaps more synonyms. We have to face a communication challenge as well, a communication deficit within the UN. That should be also part of our shared and collective agenda. So thank you for everything that we have heard. I think that a combination of your voices should be part of this narrative of hope that Fox is working on now, and it's making a great contribution to have the narrative right, as Barbara was saying. If we have the narrative right, perhaps we can address better equipped the trust deficit and the implementation deficit of the UN. And we have to grab, as I mentioned before, we have to grab this opportunity of building back better. This phrase, you know, sometimes you repeat a phrase over and over again that it loses traction and meaning, but we should grab that phrase, take it for us and say yes. And building back better should not only imply building back better our economies, building back better our societies, our health systems, you know, to build greater resilience, etc., etc. But building back better should mean building back better our institutions, you know, our global governance arrangements. You know, we need to continue to contribute to building this narrative of hope. UN75, but also don't forget Beijing +25 this year. 25 years since the Beijing Platform for Action. So there is no building back better without us, women, especially young women. I don't mind being called a 25 plus, plus 25 or whatever, but you know, without us, without 50% of the world's population, there is no building back better. So we need a feminist, transformative global governance. and we need to be at the table as, you know, women. And please be connected to Generation Equality Forum, the UN+25 process. We very much need your voices to, you know, make it meaningful in a way. And I would just simply close, because I think that we are running out of time, but I would like to close by quoting Elie Wiesel, a Nobel laureate. He said that the opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference. So we should fight indifference. And I think that we are all here with you today in this International Peace Day because we are not indifferent. And we want to continue to be change makers and make the difference from wherever we are, whatever community we work with, whatever university, academic commitment that we have. We should fight indifference and continue to co-build a multilateral system and a UN that is relevant, that is more accountable, that is more democratic and more transparent. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Espinosa. That was a really inspiring message. And it was a great wrap up also of everything that's been said so far. I hope the young people feel that, you know, what you've said really resonated with the senior people. We're going to go on to the discussion now, but there's very little time, I've been told. So I just want to throw out one question, which is, the young people have made a lot of important points about things that have to change in the UN. And so the question is, what are you, the young people, also the older people, going to do about these, the need for change in your own lives, in your own work? And reminding us all of what Maria Fernanda said about, well, you have power to do things, to push for change. So what are you going to do now? 30 seconds for each response, please. And I'll pass the floor on to Maria for moderation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yuriko. So I would kindly ask the speakers who would want to tell us a piece of their mind now to private message me or just say I want to speak in the chat so that I can take you up one by one. Okay, so Fatu, you go ahead first.
Okay, I'll be pretty brief. I think in the line of the work that I'm interested in with studying African studies and international economics, I think in terms of the global diaspora, but specifically the Black diaspora, it's important to consider interconnectedness. So the work that I seek to do involves connecting young people in the Black diaspora across countries. So that could include study abroad, mentorship programs. And I think it's the idea of connecting people together who might have brilliant ideas to innovate the cities and the countries in which they reside in, but to kind of leverage and pick up where the slack may be. So for me, that looks like doing community service work in sub-Saharan African countries. That looks like giving students who are in countries such as Senegal, Ghana, Gambia, the opportunity to come to communities, African-American communities in the United States, across Latin America, and just building on the idea of connecting others together so that one, we can build on the ideas that we already have to see a better world and a better future that we want to have. So that's the basis of the work that I want to do. But one thing that I think is very important and I've seen in my own life is the importance of literacy and the lack of literacy that are in so many that fall in so many Black communities. So I think connecting those two ideas together can allow us to live in a more fruitful society.
Thank you, Fatu. Devesh would also like to say something.
Yeah. So I believe that what can be done keeps changing according to where you are in your own life and what you understand at that point of time. And while I was earlier, I have tried to work while connecting students from deep inside Brazil to myself going to Kabul and helping out and getting stuck in ISIS attacks, to going to Fiji and planting mangrove trees. Now I've further realized that it's more of an internal journey for everyone, where the problem starts in the mind of individual, like the Charter of UNESCO also says, and that's where it has to be countered. So now I have started working on self-transformation of individuals, and which can be done in a massive way and not in one step, because even if you try to give food to people, that will still make them, they are still separative. It will delay the problem. It will not evolve them psychologically. Psychologically, man is still the same. On the outside, you might put in 100 structures, but psychologically, we are same like 50,000 years we were earlier. So till that won't change, and that human psychologically will not evolve to have love for the other individual like they have for their own son at the home, things will not work out. That's what I believe in.
Thank you very much, Devesh. So up next we would hear Zeynep, if you want to share with us your thoughts.
Yes, I just want to say that the points about technology and how it could relate to solving the problem of employment, it was actually a project in business studies that I had been given, and I drew up this idea to basically take into consideration the deprived people who own businesses, but since they haven't been introduced to technology, they weren't able to take advantage of it fully. So I actually intend to put this into practice on my own individual level with some volunteers and friends of mine. Also, as a climate change activist, I have mobilized people in my community through my social media platforms, and I wish I just hope to continue doing this work, serving the people of my land.
Thank you. Then Arturo would also like to share his thoughts with us.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to tell you a very, very short story. Once after explaining my let's say intangible faith in young generation, someone I'm very close with, someone older than me, told me that every generation think that they will do better than the previous ones. And I truly think that this person was wrong. I have so much trust in my generation and even more in the coming ones. But seeing all of you here, all of the people present here, also underline that by connecting with the so-called older generations, it's key to achieve what you are aiming for, a better world for all. So youth, let us just open to all these also wonderful experienced people and try to influence them and make them understand our dreams and listen to their dreams too. And after listening to each other, maybe we can try to get things done together. Thanks.
Thank you, Arturo. I was actually told the exact same thing a few days ago, and I felt very discouraged. But then I thought, okay, this is not true. The only thing we have to do in order to be better than the generations before us is listen to them, read, get all the knowledge we can, collaborate, and learn from the things they did wrong, and from their failures, which, okay, they tried as well, but they didn't achieve some things before maybe they should have put the stone a bit more left than right, or should have gone, I don't know, there's different things that could have gone wrong, and we just need to listen to them and try to do better and not be discouraged from the beginning. So yes, there is actually no one else who would like to share something with us. So I would like, if Yoriko would not like to say maybe something also for the conclusion of this discussion. I thought it was very interesting. I think we need a lot more time to talk about these things, but a few ideas were brought up and a lot of different perspectives. So Yoriko, please go ahead.
No, I thought it was an interesting discussion too, and I agree that we needed more time. Maybe just one point, going back to what Maria Fernanda had said about young people having power, both in terms of doing something like you all are proposing to do and are actually doing in your own lives, but also to make those in power do the right thing. And one of the things to do is to vote. And this is, I think, also relevant to what one of the speakers was saying about the UN as a product of decisions taken by member states, and the member states are governments. And I think it is very important for us to be thinking about how to make our own governments do the right thing in the UN forum, so that the UN as a whole becomes more effective and towards making the world a better place. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yoriko. So we have reached the end of our discussion, unfortunately. I don't think the discussion of a better place and a better world will ever reach its end, but we can always strive for that. So I would like to give the floor to Yorgos now for the next part of today's event. Thank you all for being here and sharing your ideas.
Thank you, Maria, and many thanks from me too to all our speakers, young and less young, but always young at heart. And I think we'll take a lot of what we heard. The discussion continues to advance the work of FOGS with you also. If you think of partnerships, synergies, ways, things to do together to advance this agenda, we are open, both the DICE and FOGS and all of our partners. So thank you very much, Maria and Yoriko, for your moderation of this. You would have more things to say yourselves, the two of you with your rich experience. Very rich for Yoriko in terms of time, and very intense also, Maria, when you started the Fridays for Future in Greece. Thank you very much. And we go to the next different section. It's more like less talking to the mind and the intellect and more to the senses. But Keshav will introduce our next participant.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Yorgos. And just the one thing that came to my mind when I heard all of this, that I can leave my one message to everyone, is a message by Buddha, where he said, have compassion for all beings, rich and poor alike. Each has their suffering. Some suffer too much, others too little. So that's one of the things that I would just leave as my message to everyone. Now to move to our next presenter, let me quickly invoke Justice Ginsburg here as a tribute to her while I introduce our next segment. And I'd quote her, and she said, "Fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you." So with Stronger with Music is something that resonates with that message deeply. Piera, a friend, a colleague, a partner from across oceans, I can say, between India and Europe. Piera is a singer, songwriter, actor, filmmaker, and founder of the company Stronger with Music. Stronger with Music basically promotes the importance of music and mental health and also social impact. She's a passionate SDG advocate. Piera has been working in climate change, on domestic violence, violence against women. So she has been featured on CBS, NBC. She's come out with some incredible songs for sensitization, which are also raising awareness and mobilizing support for many causes, two of them being Come Back Home, which is the Abaco relief song, and then her single Used, has been used by several institutions around the world for promoting awareness. She has already performed at the UN headquarters on the International Women's Day in an event hosted by the Aspire Artemis Foundation. So, Piera, over to you, and thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Keshav, for the introduction. Hello, Your Excellencies and esteemed guests and speakers. Happy 75th anniversary to the UN, and also a very happy International Day of Peace. I have loved hearing from fellow youths like myself, and I'm very honored to be the featured artist. So today I'm going to be showing you my Comeback Home Abaco relief song music video. So for the last year, the song, the video, and the campaign has been raising awareness and funds to provide humanitarian aid, and also to build infrastructure in the Abaco, Bahamas that was destroyed by Hurricane Dorian last year, and it's a place that I've called home since I was a baby. So I made this video from home footage, from friends and family out in Abaco, and I also included victims of the hurricane to be a part and sing in the ending chorus. And this song is really about bringing the community that I love very much together through adversity, and also to find peace as we rebuild. And as Her Excellency Maria Fernanda Espinosa was saying, we too want to build back better. So Keshav, if you could share the video, that would be fantastic. Here I am, Key Beach. Honestly, been a hard day. So seeing all the devastation. As you see, there's not a lot behind me. Walls and roofs, some buildings everywhere.
Months old when I first touched down. Friends I found, and they're a family now. From girl to teen, dancing at tipsies. Chris sings his song, so brave, so bold. Abaco is where you feel the glow, hear the singing voices when the sun's down low. We all know that we dance for hope, so we made the choice that we're gonna come back home, come back home. The love that helps you grow, always waiting here with all you've known. Home, come back home. Feel the lighthouse home when you're coming home to Abaco. Cinnamon buns, Florence at the grill. It's silent chill, she's world famous still. Everyone's like her, just come and see. This township's soul, it breaks the mold. Abaco is where you feel the glow, hear the singing voices when the sun's down low. We all know that we dance for hope, so we made the choice that we're gonna come back home, come back home. The love that helps you grow, always waiting here with all you've known. Home, come back home. Feel the lighthouse home when you're coming home to Abaco. A gourmet smash at the Blueberry Bar. We dance in the stars. Green Turtle Club, the sea at dusk, a paradise rebuilt by us. So come back home, come back home. The love that helps you grow, always waiting here with all you've known. Home,
Thank you all so much for watching the video. I really hope that you enjoyed the Come Back Home Abaco Relief Song video. And something that I would really love to focus on is the word home. And I love this word. Home is definitely a place that we can create and a place that we feel safe and loved and surround ourselves with community and friends and family. And the Abacos right now are still very much in need of aid and help, as some are still living in makeshift housing. We have Abaconians who are living off food distribution still and now have rising COVID cases. So my campaign is really towards rebuilding and also helping to restore the Abacos and give hope to my friends that survived this disaster, that they are not forgotten. And just want to check, can everyone see me? Everyone see me? I think so. Yes? Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Dr. Joseph. Okay, fantastic. So disaster. So as we know, part of Goal 13 is climate change. And with that comes disaster strategy. And thank you to our keynote speaker, Richard Kinley, for mentioning national and also local action. And what I'd really love to see is governments signing up for long-term measurable goals when it comes to reconstruction after disaster. And the UN comes in with their incredible aid and they help any way that they can, but we need the governments to commit to working together to create a sustainable future, an environment and working force, again, when rebuilding the community and the infrastructure. And we really need to work together. And one of my favorite lines within the Come Back Home Abaco Relief song is, "Friends I've found and we're a family now." And this is so important today as we are in 2020 of COVID-19 pandemic. We've got economic uncertainty and isolations, the California fires and earthquakes, hurricanes sitting in the Atlantic right now, and we need to join forces and come together. And I believe that music, the arts, the creative economy have the power to consciously and subconsciously bring about connection, community, and peace. And we can be, and we should be focusing on health messaging through art. So my company, Strong with Music's goal is to promote the importance of music and mental health and music and social impact. With the power of the creative economy, we can bring communities together and be a part of this change and encourage more people to listen, which has been such a great takeaway from today's discussion. And of course, we know that evidence data is absolutely essential for establishing any scientific truth, but we also know that that alone it's not sufficient and it's not adequate to change people's minds and to change people's behaviors and attitudes and deep-seated opinions. And in order to do that, we need to provide an emotional connection. And art can do that. Art provides empathy. Art provides that global connection. So today we're celebrating the 75 years of the United Nations. And as we've heard today, we need to work to strengthen the UN together. And as Her Excellency Maria Fernanda Espinosa said, we are the UN. I love that. I love that. So it's up to all of us to help bind the nation together and also work towards a better world and also uphold the SDGs to achieve the UN's agenda of 2030.